Okay, go ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining in for today's session. Just a quick introduction about me for people who didn't join yesterday. So even though you haven't joined yesterday, you can still be able to understand whatever we are discussing now. So my name is Vajrang, and I have total 9+ years of experience in the IT industry. So if you want to go ahead and check out about me, please check out with my YouTube channel, Automate with UiPath. And along with that, you can also follow me in my LinkedIn channel. So today we are going to cover about RE-Framework with respect to the code and how exactly is RE-Framework built and what are the different stages and how the code is segregated at different levels and some UiPath RE-Framework example and how can we learn. If you are looking for interviews, maybe some around in every interview, some 5 to 6 questions will be covered in this particular training program or in this particular workshop. So please be attentive. Let's start with the ReFramework code without any further delay. So yesterday, this is our meeting notes. And if you want to see or if you want to grab the details of day 2, I will be just adding up the day 2 details in this day 1 and day 2. So since I will be explaining more on what and where things will work on, we'll just work on this. So here we have day 2. So in this day 2, let's try to cover yesterday's process, or let's try to work on a simple process. Home, and let's start. Okay. And today we are going to see a simple use case. Take an array of items and work with them. So the sample can be like this. Array of items can be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And the requirements are every item must be multiplied by itself. Okay, this is a simple requirement, and we should send out the output. Output should be in log message. I'm not complicating the things at all here, because the more we complicate the use case, the more it will be difficult for you to understand RE-Framework. So instead of doing that, let's understand a simple use case. That would be the agenda. So this is my basic RE-Framework code, and this is a new one. So I haven't added any code in this. For our ease, let's go ahead and create a new. Okay, and let's right click and add sequence, and this is a simple flowchart or complete flow. Okay, so now that this is my complete flow, so I need to do some steps, right? We need to initialize some items, we need to multiply by itself, and the output must be logged in. Let's write that logic over here. So what should we do? First, let's assign some items. Assign and Control K, ARR of inputs. So what these inputs will carry? These inputs will carry a array of items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And to edit or update with these errors, let's go ahead and let's change this to array of type integer. So this is what we are going to add. So this is my input that is fixed, and let's do a for loop. So again, if you're thinking that this is what I'll explain, no. So let's try to first write the logic and then understand how we are going to use them. So here we are going to take array of inputs, and the input should be an integer. So in the properties, let's change this to an integer, because this is containing an array of items and integer value. Okay, so here let's log message. So this will be our output. Okay, and item into item will be our output. So simple. We are trying to write the multiplication or a square of a number. Run file. Here I am not dealing, or I'm not checking with any kind of exceptions. I'm not checking with any kind of business rules. I just have one business rule, that is take a number, whatever the input is, and I know that this is the number that I am going to get, and I will get the output. And if you are seeing, the outputs are coming in like this: 1, 4, 6, 9, 16, 25, and 36. So this is my flow, and that is good. Niklesh, is it possible to turn on chat for everyone, or it's not possible?
Yeah, doing that.
Yeah, go ahead and do it.
Done.
Okay, if you have any questions, just go ahead and type in. Okay, now let's write out the steps, what we have done, and let's see. So for every input, for every item, it must be multiplied by itself. This is what we are doing, and the output must be in log. So this is done. Now how to convert this process or any process into ReFramework? Okay, so if you have seen yesterday's code or yesterday's understanding with respect to ReFramework, see, ReFramework is not a structure, or it's not an architecture. It's like a pre-built code where it's already built. So you just need to know where to keep things and how to keep things. First thing is we have 4 stages in it. The second thing is we will have get transaction item. Okay. The third thing is go with process, and the fourth thing is go with end process or end state. If you can see in the main workflows, we can see this is the end process. Okay. So now we have the list of steps 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let me take this to a new page so that this will be easy. Okay. Now, how can we make sure that these particular steps are allocated to these particular states? So this is what ReFramework is all about. We already have all the logic written. If we have any exception, it will be able to understand it. It will be able to correct the handle the exceptions and all. But where should we write the exact logic? Okay, while I'm typing in or while I'm explaining you can also tell me where to write the code. So the first question is where can we write the initialization, and how are we picking one item, where the process is done, and what are we writing in end process. So if you can just type in over, just go ahead and type it. So to my understanding, we need to initialize, or we need to add the data in the input or init. But even in the init, there is something called first run. Okay, so why are we using first run here? So let's take an example. Yesterday, when there is an exception or when there is an error, the bot retried, but when it retried, it did not reinitialize all the things. Okay, so for that reason, any kind of data initialization that you're doing, there is something called first run sequence. Again, this is a sequence. This is a first run sequence. And here is where you will have all the assets, or you will have all the config initialized, and any process or any kind of, if you want to add any orchestrator queue from the orchestrator, if you want to dynamically add orchestrator queue name, you can do that from first run. And the second thing is you can see if you want to kill any process in the first run itself, like, okay, even before starting anything, I just want to kill the process to make it a clean slate. So killing process. So I have all these things in here in the first run. Now, along with this, I need to add code. So this is what will be different. Add code to initialize the data. Okay, so this is the place where we will initialize the data. So here we will assign all the array items. So here there is a catch. Now, if it is an array, then we are assigning all the items. But what if this is a data Excel? So read all Excel here and initialize. So what if this is then, if this is a folder and there are multiple items in this folder, then what we need to do? Initialize files or file paths in here. So again, any kind of code you need to write in here. For example, after adding the business logic, this is the place where you can write. So I will just make sure that this is maximized. So double clicking on first run. So see here. So this is where we have all the details. Along with this, we will just add the code. Let's see with the complete flow, assign statement, copy and paste. So if you want to add something, or if you want to add log files, let's instead of log, there can be anything, or you can just write, I will just write comment out. So I'll just add comment here. So here, let's add this particular detail. So if I want to initialize any array of items or any kind of input that I want to do, I will give it over here. So that is the requirement. Okay. Now here is one catch that I would like to say. Now that we have read all the inputs, where that input should be assigned. See, in ReFramework, there are variables that we need to consider. So there are multiple variables. In that, I will tell you 3 important variables that you need to make sure. Okay, how to get predefined ReFramework to copy paste? Just go to home and start with the ReFramework project. So this is where you can get the complete template pre-built. Okay, there is no need for you to copy and paste the code. Okay, and here in the input, we are assigning it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But in ReFramework, there is a variable already created for this. That is initialize data. The variable name is, if you can see here, this is DT transaction data. Now, by default, this is with data table. The transaction item is with data table. So what we can either do is, instead of assigning it as an array, we can either add it into the orchestrator, or we can also try to have the items. I'm not going to customize the ReFramework now, because right now that's not possible, or that will not be possible. But what we can do, instead of having these items in here, let's try to do one simple change. So in the input file, so in the data, I will just create an input. In this input, I will just add a new Excel file. So this is my input Excel file. And in this input Excel file, I'll just try to do a few things. So I will just add input 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, I'm not changing the variable types here. I'm using as is. So if you want to use it by default, whatever is available, then, but the default data type is data table. But if you want to change it, of course you can change it. And the place you need to change is in transaction data, you need to change this to array of items. Now I'm just going with the flow with whatever we have. So now that we have added up the file, let's go ahead and read range workbook. So I'm going to take the path, and the path will come from input data input.xlsx, and this output, whatever output you have, or any kind of output, or the transaction data, the complete collection of transaction data, you need to assign it to properties dt transaction data. So this is the important thing that you need to consider and do. Okay, now let's go ahead and delete this and make sure that, let's go ahead and type into give empty values. So now this is given to an empty project. Just a second. So let's go ahead and check with this. Now that we have added or updated all the details, what exactly do we need to do? We need to pick one item, or you can say that we need to pick one particular item. So here we go. Just a second. Guys, I need to take a hard stop over here. Please start with your questions. I will join back in 2 minutes, or sorry, in 20 minutes. Please excuse me, as I mentioned. Thank you.
Sure, Vajrang, no problem. You can stop your screen. Yeah. Guys, we have 3 other speakers today. Okay. So Vajrang is having some issue, as we know. So please drop the questions. We have Aditya, we have Patrudu, we have Vamsi Goli. So who are the other experts? So if you have any questions in ReFramework Part 1, ReFramework Part 2, we can discuss. And okay, until Vajrang is back. So Patrudu and Aditya are there.
Yes.
Yes, okay. Between you can pick the questions from the chat. If the question is valid and important, you take it. And guys, you can take the hand raise option as well. You have this hand raise option. So between somebody having any question, post in the chat. Okay. So Aditya and Patrudu or Vamsi can take one question. If we have 2 Excels as input, how can we use output data table? Are you guys taking Aditya, Patrudu?
Yes. So if we have more than one input, like if you have 2 Excel files, you are saying, right? So like if both Excel files of similar kind of structure, like if the column names and everything is same, we can append those data, those 2 data tables. We can merge those 2 and we can utilize, like you will get a single data table and you can utilize that.
Okay, I see one question. Somebody has asked how to deal with the dispatcher and performer. So I'll quickly share my screen and show you like how do you deal with this. So hope Vajrang would have explained you what we exactly do in initialization, what we do in get transaction and process transaction, right? So first of all, you need to understand what is dispatcher, what is performer. Dispatcher means something we are adding to the queue. So dispatcher is we are telling the robot that you need to perform some actions in the later on stage. So that dispatcher actions, you can do it in the initialization as well. So if you do open this initialization, you will have some activities. So if you go to click on activities and just type queues and add queue item, add transaction item, and add bulk queue item. These 3 activities is basically adding the queue items to the orchestrator, right? So dispatcher means you are adding the data to the orchestrator. So those adding the data to orchestrator, you can put it in the initialization state, right? Now, after you do this, if you have not followed how to add the data in this, you will get to know by end of today's session. But these 3 activities will help you to add the data to the orchestrator. That is called dispatcher process. Now, what is performer? So this is most commonly asked, even if you go for interview, what is the difference between dispatcher and performer? Now, getting the data. So we have already added in the initialization state. Now, if you want to get the data, so if you see this get transaction data state, and here you will have something called get transaction data workflow. If you just open it, and here it says get transaction item. So just remember one thing, adding the data to queue is called dispatcher. Getting the data from the queue is called performer. Performer means it is retrieving the data and processing the data. So that processing will happen in the get transaction data. So to the person who asked me the difference between dispatcher and performer, the answer is adding the data to queue in the initialization is called dispatcher. Performing that particular data, if you want to update to a web application or if you wanted to do anything with that particular data in the get transaction data, that is called performer, and that can be done in get transaction data workflow. If in case any doubt, you can just reply to your message.
So I think Vamshi, another question is there. Like you explained 3 activities, right? Someone is asking for the difference between those 3. I think you can continue with that.
Yeah. Okay, so you see there are 3 activities: add queue item, transaction item, bulk queue item. So bulk, what is bulk? Let me, okay, I'm just, okay, let me take a new Excel sheet. Like Vajrang also shared us one sheet, right? Where you have like number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have, let's say there are more than 10, 15 records in your Excel. Let's take one sample Excel sheet. Now you will easily understand when to use these 3 activities. Just imagine there is one Excel sheet, and then this in the Excel sheet, let's say you have, let's say 50 records. 50 records, just understand, if I need to use or add this data to an orchestrator in the queues, one by one, if you see add queue item, I just dragged add queue item activity. And then if you go to properties, and then if you see item information, you can only add one queue item at one stage. So you will get more details about queues in tomorrow's session when we are dealing with orchestrator. But understand one thing today, when you're adding a data to queues, you can add only one item here. But if you go to bulk add queue item, you all know what is bulk. Bulk means lot of data at one go. So let's say this Excel sheet is having 50 records. Now at one go, if you wanted to add this data to the orchestrator, you would use this bulk add queue item. And you know, like we already had that session of data tables. You give the data table input here and the queue name, like which queue you wanted to add. So tomorrow you'll see what is queues, everything step by step in a very detailed way. But just imagine bulk means you're adding more data, more than one data at one time. Add queue item is one item at one time. And add transaction item means it will add the data and also parallelly it will go and process that record. So dispatcher performer, dispatcher adding the data. For adding the data, you use add queue item, bulk add queue item. And transaction item means it will add the data to queues and also it will process that particular item. What is this processing? What is this queues? Everything tomorrow you'll get even more and more clarity. Any other questions?
And there is one more question, which is how many kill process available in default RE?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
How many kill process available in default RE?
Okay, so if you see in the initialization state, here you will have something called kill process. So now, first of all, you need to understand what is kill. If anybody would have got clarity on kill, that's fine. For the people who don't know what is the need of killing a process, just take an example. When you wanted to start an application, like you wanted to open Chrome, let's say Chrome is already installed in my, already opened in my machine. Okay. Now my requirement is I wanted to close that Chrome and then do the next step. Let it be Chrome or Internet Explorer or Excel sheet or whatever. Now, what you need to do is, as a developer, you need to type kill. Okay, you will have this activity called kill process. You drag this kill process activity, and you should tell the robot kill which application. If you want to kill Chrome, just say Chrome and say OK. That's it. So now I'll show you something like a live demonstration of how to use this kill. So as you can see, there are 4 Excels open in my machine. Now, if I want to close all the Excels at one time, I don't like robot should close all of them at the same time. Then what I will do is I'll just come to this process name, double quotes, and just say Excel. That's it. Just open this, use this kill process, give the Excel as the process name, and then you run it. Now this kill process activity will close all of those Excels open in your machine. So we'll just wait for a few more seconds. And you see all the Excels open in my machine were closed. Now this is the reason. So if you want to close all Excels, all Chromes, or all Internet Explorers open in your machine at one time, then this is an activity, and this is the place in ReFramework you should use. Any other questions?
Yes. There is one more question here, which is, consider a transaction item is processing, and for some reason the transaction is failed, which will not be under system or business exception. What will happen here? Will it start from initialization?
Okay, very good question. So if you go to process transaction, and then first of all, as somebody has asked, what is system exception, business exception? I'm considering you know the difference between system exception and business exception. Now, if you see this workflow called set transaction status. So now I'm just opening this workflow, and then this will open the new workflow. So here what happens is every record or every transaction item, if it is successful, it will go into this sequence. If it is any other problem, it will go to business exception or system exception. But ultimately, whatever the record we are finding in orchestrator, let's say it is retrieving something, it should basically update the transaction as either success or failed. If it is failed, then you should give a reason. So just to show you something, again, I'm typing queues. Okay, I just typed queues, and these are all the queue related items. If anybody has not got any no idea on this, again, I can explain. But whatever the question somebody has asked, the answer for that is, if you see set transaction status. So now if I'm just using this activity, so if you see, when you're setting this transaction status for that particular record, you should tell as a developer should tell if it is a successful or failed. If it is failed, then see, you should definitely assign a reason. Reason also you'll have to provide. But for every record, you will have to basically update as a failed or successful for as a mandatory. What happens if I'm not marking as set transaction status, like if I'm not updating to fail or pass? Tomorrow when we see orchestrator, definitely you'll get to know.
Okay, and there is one more, which says, I'm getting a data from a BD pass server. I'm assuming it is a database server as a text file. How can we add this data to queue? I think you can get to know this more about these queues and adding data to queue tomorrow.
Yeah, but just a slight just quick answer for that is, when you have the data, I'm expecting the data to be in a data table, right? So like I said, right, when you have the data in a data table, then directly use bulk add queue items. At one go, whatever data you have, that will be basically added to the orchestrator queues. So I cannot show at this moment how orchestrator will look like, but that's a simple thing. But to add the data to data, like if you want to add this data table to orchestrator to the queues, then this is the activity. And here you need to just pass the data table, what is your data table. So in that, if you see this bulk add queue item, and this will ask you two inputs. One is data table. What is the data table? So you said database, then you need to give the data table, what is your data table, and queue name. So what is this queue name, from where do you get? This is something with the orchestrator. So you'll have to wait for tomorrow. Then if you give these two inputs, then your data is in the orchestrator.
Yes, to add on to that, you can convert the text file data into a data table. If we have a comma separated values in the text file, then you can convert it into data table and then pass it on. And there is one more question. If we have only one transaction item, how can we build process in ReFramework? Where we build it?
See, if it is always one transaction, then you need to decide, do you need to implement this solution in the ReFramework, right? Let's say at this moment it is one transaction, but it can change in the upcoming days. Let's say today you have only one transaction, but tomorrow the transactions may be more than one. So if it is always one, then first of all, you need to decide whether it should be implemented in ReFramework or not. Yes, if it is need to be implemented in ReFramework, then you'll have to follow this same structure. So after getting the data, and then it will process the record. After processing the record, it will go and check if there is any more record. If it is only one record, only one transaction is completed, and then it will go to end process. So it all depends, because a developer has to customize this RE framework. Whatever Vajrang would have explained you, this is a template of RE framework. But you can change this RE framework according to your own requirement. So if it is one transaction, or if it is more data. And the thing is, in UiPath, this is how the RE framework template will look like. But whatever you wanted to do with this template, you can do anything. Any other questions?
And also to add on to that, you can convert this RE framework into a linear process framework, removing the get transaction data and use it for the supply.
Yeah.
And I think there is also one more which asking about throw and rethrow.
Okay, so I'll easily explain you this concept of throw and rethrow. Okay, so by now you should know the try catch activity, because one of my friend would have explained you this try catch activity. So now I'll go and type error. Whoever is using UiPath now, you can just type error in your UiPath Studio. Here you will see try catch, throw, rethrow. So now the question is, what is the difference between throw and rethrow? Okay, so now just concentrate on this box, this highlighted box. I am calling it as try catch activity. So if you want to perform any action, okay, for example, I wanted to type something to a notepad. Now I'm saying type. I'm using type into activity. Okay, now I want to type something. So what I'm doing is I'm just indicating, I clicked on indicate on screen, and then I'm indicating this notepad. Okay, I have indicated this notepad. Okay, now imagine this notepad is not available. What happens? If this notepad is not available, then it would have gone to catch. That means if this particular activity is throwing an error, that means this activity is creating a problem, then automatically the next execution will go to catch. Right? You would have learned this in the exception handling concept. Now, when this is automatically taking care, then why is the need of this throw activity? Okay, why is the need of throw activity? Now, let's say when you work in the project in an upcoming days, when you're in the upcoming future, you're the developer. Now your business analyst will tell you phone number should be always 10 digit. You all know that in India, most of us have that phone number 10 digit. Just consider if user would have entered 9-digit phone number, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There is 9-digit phone number only. Now what your business analyst will tell you, if the phone number is not a 10-digit, then what you need to do is throw business exception. This is called business exception. This phone number is not according to the business requirement. So you use this throw activity straightforward and say in the exception, in this pop-up, you said new business rule exception. In bracket, you say, please check phone number. Okay, so this is how you use this throw activity in the try block. And now if you see this rethrow, I'm just using this rethrow activity here. And what it is saying is rethrow activity must be used only in the try. That means one important question in most of the interviews also, I would see this question. The question will be, can you use rethrow activity in try block? The answer is no. And first of all, I'll tell you the difference between throw activity and rethrow activity. Now, this I hope everybody would have understood. What I did is, if a phone number is not a 10-digit number, then I would say throw business rule exception. And when I'm throwing it, automatically the execution will go to catch here. Okay. Now, in this place, I wanted to use rethrow activity. What happens if I'm putting a rethrow activity is, whatever the message I have thrown here, if I need to throw this message to somewhere, let's say, for example, okay, I just created a workflow name called call kill. Now, if you go to project and here you'll have kill, just drag and drop this kill activity, sorry, kill project. So now just to answer your question in a straightforward way, if I am using a rethrow activity in the catch block, whatever the message I have here will be thrown back to calling wherever it was called. So that message will be called to this place. So to be simple, throw, if you put a throw in try block, the message goes to catch. If you put a rethrow, this message goes back to where it was called, which is at this place. Any other questions?
Yes. How retry mechanism works in ReFramework, either using orchestrator or config file?
See, it again depends on your scenario. So like I said, right, in SID transaction status XAML.
The question is how retry works in ReFramework using orchestrator or config file, where we will give the count of retries.
This thing, when we are
maybe we can to answer that, we can use the config file to give the count of how many retries, or you can directly mention the retry count in the queue that you are creating in the orchestrator. So both, you can use both.
Yeah, both. I'll just show you where do we put this retry count and all. So this is the config file. Initially, Vajrang would have told you what is this config file. And in this constant sheet, you will see this maximum retry number. And as of now, initially it is saying as 0. So based on this number, your retries will work accordingly.
Yes, I think that answers that question.
I think Suhani has raised hand. Do you have any question?
You can unmute and ask your question, Suhani. Okay, we will go to the next question. And instead of taking the transaction item from queues, how to get the data from the local machine in ReFramework?
Okay, very good question. Yes, so always you will not see the data from queues. Like when Vajrang started today's session, he said data is in from the numbers, data from the Excel. It can be from anywhere. So, but initially when you open ReFramework for the first time, you see the variable is showing as queue item. Okay, transaction item, the variable type is queue item. One important thing what you need to do is, if the data is not the queues, then you need to say ReFramework, what is the transaction item? Let's say my transaction item is data table. Then I would need to change this to transaction from queue item to data table. Now whatever the data you have, let's say from queue to data table, this has been converted to data table. Now, when you're calling the data, let's say in my Excel sheet, let's say there are 5 records. Let's say this is my Excel data, like row number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now I can get one data in the get transaction data workflow. I'll delete all of these things. And like I told you, as somebody has asked me, what if queues was not my source? Then straightforward, delete this activity. When you know that your data is not coming from queues, just delete this activity. That is the reason I told you, you'll have to customize the ReFramework according to your requirement. Your requirement is your data is not coming from queues. Then where is the data? Let's say your data is coming from Excel sheet. Excel means the data is in data table. Now the data table activity, instead of this activity, you could basically put an if condition. Maybe Vajrang will, when you come back, he'll show you the next steps. Then you can basically get one item from that Excel sheet.
I'm back. Vamshi,
Yes.
Thank you so much. So can I take it up?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Vamshi, and all the team members who were really supporting me at this hour of time.
Thank you so much, Vamsi. Really appreciated, brother. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay. So there are many multiple interesting questions and important questions that we all see in the chat. That's the reason I have asked to enable the chat. So we'll answer each and everything. But before doing that, let's continue with our process. Let me know once you are able to see the screen.
Yes, we are able to.
Got it. And is this being recorded?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, now we read the data. This is where we are, where we are trying to fetch the information from somewhere. So what if this is not a data table? What if this is a group of people? Then even then, that should be assigned to data, transaction data. If it is not data, if it is not a bunch of a group of people, if it is a pond of fish, then even then the complete collection should be assigned to this particular variable. So that's how you need to manage or maintain this particular variable. Very important. Second important thing is we have assigned two things. First thing is a collection. This will contain complete collection. Okay. So this will contain the complete collection of information. And there is one more variable. Let me just highlight this one for you. And there is one more variable for you that is, let's go back and the variables in my panel. So that is transaction item. So this transaction item is the important item, transaction item. So yesterday we discussed, like if there are 100 items, one item will be a transaction item. So if we are taking in yesterday's demo or in yesterday's meeting, if you can see with the items. So if there is a dictionary and if this is a collection and if this is a transaction data, then one key value pair will be your transaction item. So what is transaction item is one of the important questions that's asked in the chat. So transaction item is any item that you are currently working on. Just remember, a robot can work only on one thing. It cannot work on 100 items, but 100 robots can work on 100 different items. They should not be working on single item because that will create a redundancy or duplication. So if there are queue of items, then one item will be taken, queue item will be taken. And if there are data rows, then one item column, because data row is a collection of columns data. So one data column will be taken, and if it is files, file path, they will be taken. So that's how you need to segregate or you need to manage the things. Just remember that. Let's get back to the code. And now we are trying to add the information. Someone asked what is bulk queue items and what is how do we add queue items? Now, one thing that I would like to clarify. Dispatcher, dividing the code into dispatcher and performer is not RE-Framework process. Okay, so dispatcher is a separate code where you're trying to add data to some collection from where you pick. For example, yesterday, let's take the theater example. In that, someone is creating a collection of tickets for you. So that collection of tickets, someone is doing it for you. That is a dispatcher process. And people who are going to watch the movie or who's going to take the ticket are performers. They are going to perform some activity. So in the same way, the dispatcher process is the process to assign or to allocate some data for multiple process to work on. So why do we have a separate dispatcher and performer process? Why don't we have a single process? Why don't we have, like in this one, we are having everything in a single process. Let's take a simple example. In actual projects, there will be 30 to 40 code files. Each will be divided into their own particular modules. Now, if one process is having 30 to 40 items, the maintenance becomes a very big issue. And moreover, if you want to run only the dispatcher part or only the performer part, okay, I just want to add the items to queue or I just want to add the items to collection. That cannot be possible if you have everything in a single sequence. So that is the reason you will have, or you have an option to divide the code. Again, that's not related to RE-Framework. RE-Framework will just enable you by default to pick items from orchestrator. You can change that and you can differentiate it. Now here we go. Now we are creating performer as well as dispatcher in the same process. Now in the first run, just remember, in the first run, we will create dispatcher. Now there is also a question like, what part of ReFramework runs only once in the entire execution? So the answer is first run, because when there is no data at all, only this particular sequence will run only once. So let's add DT, transaction data. Now we need to add a queue item or queue name where we need to add the details. So what we can do is, let's go into my UiPath robot, UiPath robot or assistant, and I will directly connect with my orchestrator. Right now I'm working with orchestrator, so I'll make things faster. So if I want to customize, okay, I don't want to use orchestrator, then what are my steps? Even that we'll see. So this is my orchestrator. Hopefully this will log in, continue. And let's go. So how can I make sure my orchestrator is connected or the instance is connected? So if you can see the green item here, this is what it will tell you. And on the top, you can see cloud.uipath.com, Vajra qc.n, default tenant. So I just need to change or check with this one. So this is correct. And here, let's go ahead and add queues. Go to queues and add, create a new queue. So everyone are asking, like, how can we retry? What is the option to retry? So this is the option to retry. Tomorrow you will see in queues where exactly you can retry. But for the project purpose, let's go ahead and let's add workshop is the name for the queue that I'm going to give, and hit on add. So this is the first step or initial thing that I need to do, because there should be some central location where I need to have the data. That's the place that I'm going to do. And here, the second thing that I need to do is go to project. And in that project, there is config file. Okay. So I will give you a quick information on what is config file in 2 minutes, but try to follow me with this particular process. So by default, there is a name called process ABCQ. Instead of process ABCQ, let's give out workshop as the name. So simple concept, nothing else to be given and nothing else to be updated. So here is the queue name. One thing that we need to observe or understand, there are, other than this, there is also, other than this particular transaction item, which is single item to process, there is one more important variable that is called config. Okay, so all the Excel details, or if you can see, when I open my project and my config file, all the Excel items or all the data that's available here, the orchestrator queue name and constants and assets, these are the default items that are there by default, or by default you can use them. So all you need is to know how to utilize them, but to check each and everything right now will not be possible. But just understand that if you are using orchestrator queue, and by default ReFramework supports orchestrator queue as an input, you need to give the name over here, and the value will be picked from config. Okay, so config of items, so the queue name dot toString. So again, this is the way how you represent or how you get the value from a key. So every block has a key, right? In the same way, every key has a value. So this key is unique. You should not add more keys with same name. That's the catch you need to understand. And let's close this one and save. And also let's run this only till here. So what am I exactly doing is I am trying to run the process only till here, and I'm not doing anything else. I'm not going into transaction data. I'm not going into process, nothing. So let's go ahead and debug the file. So what are your expectations with this particular item? So go ahead and type in what will be done after this particular process. What exactly will be done? Go ahead and type in. Till now, what happened? We have all queue items. Item will be added to queue. Okay. Okay. But here one thing. Why have I used bulk add queue items? Why didn't I use add queue item? Simple reason, bulk add queue items by default supports data table as an input, and it will add all the items into orchestrator in the orchestrator queue items. Okay, so now the process transaction will not be done. Just quickly understand bulk adding the queue items. So I haven't continued with this step. So if you have seen with this particular transaction items, or if you can see with workshop, let's go with view transactions. There are no transactions that are added up. So let's go ahead and step into the moment I click on or complete that activity, you can just go ahead and check with the items that are added. Here with the details, all the items are added with input. So the header is taken as the key and the value as taken is the value. So this is what you need to understand. Now I don't have anything in the process state. Okay, item is added to queue and the data type is string. See, when you are adding items to orchestrator queue, this is key value pair. Okay, don't take this as a string or value or input type. This is a key and a value. So input is a key and output is a value object. So this is an object. By default, I'll write this. This is important thing to be learned. By default, specific content, item type for all details will be object. So if you can observe, this is the key and 6 is not a integer. Now this is an object. So that's what you need to remember. So I'll just go ahead and take a screenshot of this so that you can remember better. So by default, input type or input value is by default an object. So 6 is an object. Okay. Now let's go ahead and continue with the process. Okay. And let's go ahead. So if you can see, all the items are added. Now, important thing to understand, if I continue with the items, I haven't written any code to fetch the items. Okay, now that I have added items to orchestrator, I also need to fetch the items from the orchestrator. But where are we fetching the items? Okay, now if you are able to successfully use bulk queue items, then this will not throw an error. And if you are having an issue, then this will throw an error. That's how you can get to know bulk add queue items is successful or not. Or else after adding bulk queue items, you can just use get queue items to get any new items. That's one more option. So let's continue. And what can be the output for these transaction items? All the transaction items, just give out in the messages. What can be the output of these transaction items? Why are we having things in progress state? And because I haven't written any code, why are we having this in progress state? And this is also moved to successful. What exactly have happened? Input, if you see in the history, this is taken up few seconds ago, and this is moved to success state. Done. And if I go ahead and continue, this is completed. But if you remember, I haven't touched the RE framework. I haven't written any code to process these items. And we also don't know what this is getting or generating. I just can see in the output. And if you can see processing transaction number 4, processing ending. So let me just quickly continue or let all the items complete. So let's see what's happening. Okay, all the transactions are completed and no more transaction data is available and it's closing. Let's see with the output. So how can you know that project is successful or the execution is successful easily is with the output. So if you can see here, the process transaction is started, processing transaction number 1, process started, transaction ended, transaction is successful. There is no code for it. Okay. And transaction item, getting a new transaction item again, transaction started. So getting the data, though we haven't written any code to fetch the items and to work on it, by default, we have all the code written. So here in get transaction data, it is picking up one item. Okay, get me one item from here. We played a game yesterday. So this task, or after completion of this item, this state, the next successful item after completion of this successfully, that get transaction item will be executed, get transaction data, and it will pick you only one item. Can you hear me properly?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so it will pick only one item. It will not pick all the items, and it will pick only the first item. That's how it will work. Okay. Now, once it fetches one item in process transaction state, it will work on that item. So every block has their own task to do. You should not add any code out of their range. Okay. In this particular example, the result of the crossing can be successful business rule exception or system exception. So here we are going to set, or here we are going to see if that particular process, till now we picked only one item, we haven't done anything to it. We picked an item and kept it aside, and we are assigning it to transaction item. So there is one important interview question: what is the output, or what is the output variable by from get transaction data? What is that variable from where the data will be assigned? So the answer is transaction item. So the answer is transaction item. This is where you will have the item assigned. So if in this transaction item, first one will be assigned, second two will be assigned, third three will be assigned, fourth four will be assigned. Okay, Q item is a type, but the name of it is a transaction item. Just remember that. Now here, where can I write this code? Now coming back to our process complete flow. Now this is done. We have done with this, and for each item is also completed. We are not picking up any item. The bot is already picking, the process already taking the details gradually. Now this one, this is what we need. This is the output that we need. So in this item, where should I add this code? The complete flow. This is my process state. Okay. So when I go ahead, I can just assign or add my code, add all the information that I need to process in process workflow. So this is where you have in process workflow in main. Let's go back and understand it. In main, initialized, getting transaction data, processing the transaction data, maximize it. And here you are going to see, just click on open workflow. And here invoke steps for the process. So this is the only place where you need to write the code to execute some logic or business conditions. So this is the only place. Yes. So once we complete with the details, now there is an error here. Okay, now there is an item into item, but our data is in orchestrator queue. How can I get it? This is one more interview question. How can I fetch item information from orchestrator transaction item? So I will just add one more question over here. How can I get item information from orchestrator queue? So, okay, I'll just, okay. By default, again, the code is already built in. By default, you will have two arguments in transaction item. So whatever data that you have from get transaction item, you can get it from this particular argument. So in transaction item is the place where you can get it. So let's go ahead and see how can we fetch the values. So I'll just assign item, assign. So here I don't have item here. Let's go ahead and create a variable called item. And this is of type integer. Okay, so let's go ahead and type in value integer, because we know that I know as a developer that I have assigned the value as an integer. So that's the reason I will assign it as an integer. So let's go ahead and type in the value item. And in this item, let's assign the value. So what is the value that we are going to assign? So I said clearly that we are having the value from transaction item. So in transaction item, we have keep a dot. So this is where you are going to see all the properties, whom it is assigned to, what is the deferred date, what is the due date, what is it equals, what is the ID of the transaction item. So this is also a key value pair. Okay. So by default, UiPath is providing you all these options so that you can work on them. If you want, you can work on them. So let's go ahead and see what's there in specific content. So if you can see in orchestrator, if you want to understand it blindly, if you want, or if you can see view details, you can see its specific data, right? So this is where all the data is assigned to, and this is of type object. Okay, now let's go ahead. And so this specific data is replicated, or it's taken as specific content over here, and you need to pass in the key value or the key name that you need to give. So from config, you are giving the key names, right? In the same way, from orchestrator, if you want to fetch the details, let's go ahead and give input. I'll take 5 more minutes. After 5 more minutes, this will be done. So stay tuned, and let's give out the key name, and make sure this is in string, because the keys are always in string to string. Okay, now let's have a breakpoint over here and see, but there is one more issue here. Now that I have taken the value as string, but the initial requirement or the requirement is actually to add it as an integer. So how can I do that? Let's go ahead and convert this to integer. So cint is the keyword to convert the value to an integer. So let's go ahead, and it's completed. Now this is item is completed, and this is the log message. There is one important question that is asked, like, okay, now that you have taken the data from orchestrator and queue, how can I make sure this output is also available in the orchestrator and the same queue item? So here is where you can do that. Set transaction status, but we cannot set the transaction status right away from here. Properties. Okay, so if you can see here, there is something called output. So in output, we can add the items. So in the output collection, we can add the items. But for now, let's go ahead and check with the details. And I'm having a breakpoint over here. So let's go ahead and see what exactly is happening. Okay, I'll have breakpoints at multiple stages so that we can understand what exactly is happening and how exactly things are moving in. So first breakpoint is at initialization. Let's have a breakpoint over here, and the breakpoint will have here. How do you know if the transaction? Okay, let's quickly see and have a breakpoint over here. But what if there is a requirement, or what if the performer is different and I don't have any value in the orchestrator, or I'm not assigning the data from orchestrator? This is not a dispatcher, only a performer. Then let's try to comment this out. So if I don't add the items to orchestrator, then that's it. So I can just add it to sequence. Okay, and guys, this will be a lengthy session, so just stay available. So this is the dispatcher sequence that I'm adding. Okay, so all the steps in the dispatcher are available here. I'll just comment out. I'll just make sure that there are no more items, or I'm not adding any items. So let's comment out. Control D is a shortcut. And then let's go ahead and have a breakpoint over here. And let's continue. Debug the process. Breakpoint, debug. Now, all the items that I have in the orchestrator are already completed. There are no more new items. Again, robots will pick only new items. Remember that. Get transaction item or get item will pick only the new items. It will not pick in progress state items or successful items or anything. UiPath RE-Framework will pick only new items. Now we have executed. There are no items added. So let's continue with this process, initialization, and I'm not adding any data. Okay, so now this became a complete performer process because the dispatcher process is not working. There are no data that's getting added. Continue. Now, which item will it pick? There is no transaction data. Process finished. Why? since there is no transaction items or since there is no transaction data, yesterday we clearly mentioned, or yesterday we discussed, if there is no transaction items, no data and the process, that's it. Okay, so no more processing of the items. So let's go ahead and enable this again. Let's make sure this will be enabled. Okay, and here we go. Dispatcher process, control E. So we'll add the items again and we'll make sure that we have some breakpoint in the process. Yes, we have debug. Okay, let me stop this. Stop. Let's have main debug. Okay, now once we have the details, let's continue with the dispatcher queue and dispatcher items. Once the execution is completed for dispatcher, we have all the new items again. So bot will pick only the new items and it will pick the first item. Whichever process comes in and requests for a first item, then it will pick that item. And if you can see, this is in process state and item. Let's go into immediate panel and see what is the value that we have from here. So let's go into watch and item. So in item, the value is 0 for now. Let's step into, but now the value is 1. And why? Because the transaction item in transaction item value is coming from orchestrator. Okay, so in transaction item dot specific content will have all the information. If you can observe, this is a dictionary and this dictionary is having an input and the input value is 1. So this is how the code is taken, or you can understand the code. Just understand that whatever value you have, if you use transaction item dot specific content, then you can get the value. And again, let's go ahead, step into. Now we have the process and the output is 1. Let's continue with this and let's see what's the value. Transaction item 1 is successful and it's picking up a new item. Okay, one more important question. What will be the state? What will be the state of item, queue item, if item is picked from get transaction item? Okay, the answer is in progress. That's very good traction. So let's go. So in progress state, again, if that is taken up as a new item, then this is in progress state. What if there are 10 robots executing and 10 robots executing items? Will all the robots take one item each, or will all robots work on single item? Give me your answers. I have 10 process running or 10 performers running. Okay, so the answers are coming in one item each, single item. Yes, that's correct. So each and every robot running a process will pick one item and that will be decided by orchestrator. Orchestrator will give process to or item to robots. Robots cannot take the item just like that. Okay, it will request, or it's a request type response that it will get. It will request the orchestrator, give me one item to process. If the orchestrator has items, then it will give one item. If the orchestrator is not having items, then it will say that it's not having items. Okay, this is also an important question. Go ahead and check out. Now we have the second item. Let's go ahead and step into continue. The answer is 4. So I'm stopping or I'm removing the items. So let's go ahead and continue. Let's see. There is one more thing that's happening in. Let's pause. If you can observe, there is set transaction status that is coming in. And let's see what is it checking. Okay, when set transaction status will check after try block or in the catch blocks, this will be invoked. And let's see the code, how this is available. Now is successful. What exactly is it checking? So again, two more important arguments here: business rule exception and system exception. Let's see what are the values in business rule exception. Business rule exception, the value is null, and system exception, the value is null. So if we don't have any exception, that means it is a success. If you have any exception, it means that it is a failure. We need to decide whether it is a business exception or a system exception. Okay. Now, if it is a business rule exception, it will be assigned to business rule exception. If it is system exception, then it will be assigned to system exception argument. Remember that. Okay. So this is successful now. Step into, now this is going into success state. If it is a business rule exception, it would have moved into business rule exception. If it is system exception, it is moved into system exception. So all the code is written for you. No need to check on anything. Just write your code, whatever the logic you have in the process state. That's how we are going to have these things done. So how are we going to assign business rule and system exception? Even that you need not do. That will be assigned by the framework itself, and that will be done. So let's stop the process now that you understood that, okay, success items are done. So this is where you are setting the transaction item. So in set transaction status, try catch block, in each and every flow, you're going to set transaction status. So here, this is set transaction status. The properties, if you can see, this is successful. But if you are going with business rule exception, the same activity you will be using, but the output will be failed, and you will mention the business rule exception. And the same activity you will use again for system exception as well. For system exception, here you go, Q retry, we have set transaction status failed, and this is a system exception. So this is where you need to understand that the items are getting the transaction status. Okay, so there is no need for you to write the code, just continue. And if you have observed, I have written only 2 lines of code till now, but the complete project is handling itself. Exceptions are being handled. Retry mechanism is getting handled from the orchestrator queue, and I have the complete segregated code, everything available for me. One last thing that I want to show over here is how to raise exceptions and how to make sure that items are getting executed. Okay, I'll stop the process. Now that we have stopped the process, and if there is any item available, let's check. Successfully, all the items are completed. Now, how can I make sure that I need to raise a business rule exception? So in process state, so this is where I need to write the code for process business rule exception. So I will check if condition, if, and yesterday we discussed, right? If the number is divisible by 2, item percentile 2 equal to 0. So this is my requirement. If this is true, and here is what I have, end of expression expected. So let's go ahead and take this one. Maybe I just need to add the value. Okay, let's add condition, ascent statement. So in this ascent statement, it will be an integer again, but reminder. So in this reminder, I will just add this particular item. So if the item percentile, whatever the item percentile we have, I'll just add it to item, and reminder we have integer. Okay, so let's see the value. Character is not valid. Okay, let's use mod. Okay, item mod 2. Okay, thank you so much for that. And this will give me the reminder value. Let's have a breakpoint over here. And if the reminder is equal to 0, it means that it is divisible by, reminder is divisible by 2, then it is divisible by, reminder is 0, then it is divisible by 2. So here I will write my business rule exception, that is throw. So I'm throwing it over here, and here let's write a new business rule exception. And the new business rule exception goes as don't process, or I can write my custom business rule exception. There is no need for writing only specific items. Even I can write Vajrang don't want to process Even that can be written, but for the project purpose, invalid input received. Okay, this is my input. So now this is the message that I have. So let's go ahead and save it. And this is a new business rule exception because that is a new exception that I'm triggering it. Show else, I just want to add one more item that is a system exception. So I will just add one more if condition over here. If condition. So yesterday we mentioned that if the item is divisible by 5, then I will throw a system exception. By default, you will not throw any system exceptions, but for our requirement, I am throwing a system exception over here. So if reminder, okay, or else I can take item mod 5. If it is equal to 0, that means that it is divisible by 5. Then I will throw one more exception. So now this is a system exception. That is a new exception. And this is, again, this is my custom exception, divisible by 2, by 5. Okay, I have written both business rule exception and system exception. I am writing my code to throw exceptions, but ReFramework will handle them by default. So let's go ahead and see how that's getting handled in set transaction status. I'll go ahead and keep a breakpoint over here. And here is my breakpoint. Or I can just add breakpoint over here, or I can also add it over here. Business rule exception, system exception, and here I go. I'm running the process again. Keep a quick watch on what exactly is happening and debug. So you can tell me what will be the outputs. You can just type in what are the outputs that you can expect for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. All the 6 items, what are the outputs? For 1, what is the output? 2, what is the output? You can just mention that in the chat. Okay, there is a breakpoint over here. So I'm just removing it and I'm continuing. Okay, now if you observe properly, item reminder, the value of item reminder is 0. Step into, here it is 0. Step into. Now, why did it fail? Because the reminder is 1. This is not divisible by 2. So this is correct. And here, item mod 5 is equal to 0. Step into. And then step into. Okay, so this is executing and the sequence is executed, and that's not true. So it is coming back. This is not getting executed. And if you have observed, even this doesn't have a tick mark and this is not having a tick mark. So these two are not executed. Let's go ahead and step into. So again, the output is 1. So let's continue. Let's stop at 2. Now, if it is successful, okay, I'm going and adding it to success. Let's continue and let's see a business rule exception. Next item will be a business rule exception. Why is it so? Why 2 will be a business rule exception? Abhilash, great answer. 1 success, 2 BRE, 3 success, 4 BRE, 5 system exception. That's great. So let's hit on item. Now, this is what my business wants me to do. I need to throw an exception. I should not continue further. Continue. Throw business rule exception. This is thrown. The red mark you can see is where you can see the exception for. If invalid input received, so if you can see, this is propagating or this is escalating to the higher levels. There is a small simple example that you can tell. If there is an issue with you, then you first teacher will tell you. Then if you don't listen, then it will be escalated to your parent. So that's how things will move on. In the same way, if this is throwing an error, the parent will also throw an error, or it will reproduce the error. Okay, step into or continue. So if you can see all the sequences, each and every parent is throwing an error. Now here we go. This is handled by business rule exception now. Earlier, this was handled by success, but now this is getting handled by business rule exception. So let's continue. Email with BRE, system exception. Okay, now what is that we are having? Email with BRE. So if I want, I can email with a BRE and setting the transaction status. Continue. Now we are not executing success state. We are executing a business rule exception. Step into, here is the catch. Now, when you are having a business rule exception, by default, it will also add the details like why it failed. Okay, let's see in the code or in the item. Refresh. Failed. Why it's failed. Business rule exception. View details. Reason is invalid input received. So every detail will be automatically updated. You just need to write in the code. Okay, continue. I'm just continuing it. I haven't written any piece of code other than what I want as per my requirement. So RE-Framework is stable enough and it will be able to continue on all the exceptions. All I need to do or work is execute the code. Okay, so now I will remove both these items. Let them continue this. And for fifth item, we'll have a system exception. Let's see how system exception is being handled. Before doing that, let me show you that in project exceptions folder, we don't have any screenshots. So by default, there is an important interview question again. Where will you get the screenshots, exception screenshots? The code will be available in exception or system exceptions. So this is again a throw. Okay. And here we have email to BRE. Continue. We had 4. Now we will execute 5. So here we go. So since the input is 5 and it is equal to 0, this is what an exception thrown. So step into, see, there is a difference between business rule exception and system exception. Every time there is a throw, it is throwing or it is showing you that this is an error. Now this still works in the same way because that is a throw event. Continue. Let's continue again. Continue. It will propagate till the code where this is getting handled. And here you can see exception. Now it will not check with business rule exception. It will check with system exception. Step into business rule exception. Step into. So if you have seen, the code is not executed from business rule exception, but code in system exception is getting handled. So exception, system exception is assigned with whatever exception it is. Continue. Okay, and step into. So step into queue retry. Yes, take a screenshot. Now, if you observe, take a screenshot, code is executing, and I'll continue with the process. Let's just go ahead and understand the screenshot. So on the left side, you can see the screenshot is captured and done. Boom. So if you can also see the screenshot or items over here. Now here we go with the screenshot. Till now we don't have any items over here, but now we have an exception screenshot. Okay, this is how we are going to get exceptions, and we are going to see in case of a system exception, which is unknown, which we cannot handle, or which is raised on the fly, we will be able to check with the items. How to skip orchestrator if we use rearrange for now. Okay, continue. Okay, so this is how I'd like to stop the process till now. We were able to successfully take an input, complete a process, and we are able to complete the code. And if you have observed, all the code is already written. None of the code is written by me. I have written only one thing. I have written to add the items to orchestrator, and I have written my custom logic in the process. Other than that, I haven't changed any piece of code. So that's the beauty of RE-Framework. Okay, now I'm stopping with the process, and now let's take some questions. But before that, Niklesh, you can take a handover and you can complete with the quiz, and then we will go ahead with the questions. Stay tuned. I'm seeing that people are leaving after the quiz. Stay tuned because you will get to know where the document will be available. I will give you the link as well at the end of the session, where the link is available. So you can just take out, and this document will be very useful for you. Yeah. Continue. Okay, Nikhilesh, you are there? Okay, one important thing that I would like to show here. Can you see that 5 is being repeated continuously? Let's see with this. Why 5 is being repeated? Now, if you see here, failed, this is 5. View details or application item. View details, 5. Screenshot is available. Close. But if you have observed, I haven't written any code to rewrite or create a new item. But by default, when we are creating a queue item or when we are creating a queue, we said that, okay, retry it, but retry it only once. View details. Okay. Edit. So what we are having, auto retry we have enabled, and we have enabled number of retries. So that is what is happening now. It is retrying once, and if we continue further, this will not create a new item. Okay. So if we just continue, consecutive exception is 0. Yes. And then let's see the screenshot again. So there will be 2 screenshots now. These are the 2 screenshots. So retries you can target from orchestrator queue. Okay, there is no more transaction data, and that's the end of our program. Cancel. Okay. Yes, I will share, or you can also, okay, I'm stopping the screen share. Guys, I'm taking all your questions. I will answer each and every question. Nikhilesh, can you please unmute?
Yeah, sorry, Vajrang. You were
Yeah.
telling something?
Yeah, you can start with a quiz and you can stop the recording for now.
Yeah, I will stop the
And,
recording.
Let's connect.
So you check out your screen only, and so don't see on my screen. And again, same rule, who have been winners yesterday or all these sessions, so we will not consider them. Okay, we will take the new person. All the very best and all the very best. And let's start the first question on your computer screen, please. First question on your computer screen, please. Yeah, the question is RE-Framework used only while using orchestrator queues? Very good question. There are 2 options. Very easy question. Okay. I hope everybody will give this correct answer. Okay, time's up. Okay. Okay. Very good. Correct answer is no. RE-Framework is not only used for orchestrator queues. Okay. So S, who kept S, please do check out. Next question on your computer screen, please. Second question, please. Okay. As per standard, where applications are started in RE-Framework? Okay. Very easy question again. 3 options. Okay, we'll see the correct answer is init all applications. So as per the standard, applications are started in RE-Framework is init all applications. Who gave the wrong answer, please do check out. So init all applications. Okay. So we'll move to the third question. All the very best. So who are already winners? We will take the other person. Okay, whether it is in third position, fourth position, we will take you only. If the somebody is in leaderboard of yesterday's. Okay. The final question. Final question on your computer screen, please. What will be transaction item if data source array of settings. Okay, 3 options. There are 3 options. Please do check out. Okay, time's up. Okay, time's up. The correct answer is string. Okay, what will be transaction item if data source is array of strings? So in the question only it is having the answer, it is string. Who gave the wrong answer like character and integer? So please do check out. So all the very best for today winners. We'll see the leaderboard. We know the rules and regulations. Okay, we'll see the leaderboard. All the very best. So the leaderboard, please. So Vineet, Mr. Vineet and Miss Sivani. So hearty congratulations, Vineet and Sivani. So please do drop an email on my email ID with your complete address. Please don't forget. Okay. Hearty congratulations, Mr. Vineet and Shivani. So again, I will be pausing for 1 minute to note down my email ID before I go to another topic. So my email ID is niklesh578@gmail.com. Hearty congratulations, Vineet and Shivani. But whoever been in the leaderboard, hearty congratulations. But you tried your level best. Harsh Jain, Rajan Kumar Siddha, Mohammad Iqbal, Gautami, Praveen Kumar Masala, Naveen. So Rajan Kumar Siddha, all this. So hearty congratulations, both of you. Please do send the
retry mechanism. Okay, I'll repeat this question one more time. How does retry mechanism work in ReFramework in this transaction status?
Okay. Let me just add that question on the top. Yeah, here I go. So the question goes like this. What types of retry mechanism are available in our ReFramework, and what are they? So if you are using orchestrator queues, by default orchestrator queues have an option to retry. That's what I have shown. And if you're not using orchestrator queues, in the config you have an option called max retries or max retry number. That's how you will be able to set the number of retries that a item or a transaction item can be executed. Okay, so the next question is, okay, let's take up the questions from here. So if you found the answers correct, then just give out a thumbs up, and Niklesh, you can check. Okay. Okay, why we use 2 separate processes for dispatcher and performer? Why we cannot do in one process or what? So we can obviously do all the code in one process, but if we are having a separate dispatcher and performer process, if we want to run only dispatcher process, then we can execute only that, and the performer process can be deployed into 10 different machines, and all can be executed at single instance. But if you are having both performer and dispatcher, as you have seen in the process, like every time data will be added and items will be picked up. So that's not the easiest way or the correct way when you're having multiple bots or multi-bot architecture, multiple process. So if you're using only, if you know that you are using only one item, then you can definitely go with single code which has dispatcher and performer. Dispatcher can be added in the first run. Okay. Next, difference between add queue item and bulk queue item. I think this is already answered, but again, add queue item will help you to add only one item at a time, but it will give some options, like you can add reference, you can add deadlines for each item. But with bulk queue items, you cannot do that. You can just add items at one slot. So you need to decide on how exactly you need to use these items. If you don't have any requirement to add any references or deadlines, you can go with bulk queue items. But if you need references, or even before adding items to queue, if you need to perform some activities on the data, you need to go with add queue items. Okay. Whole retry mechanism. I think this is already answered. Okay, I'm just deleting this. Okay, how to skip orchestrator and just use read range for now. Okay, so if you want to customize ReFramework, then change in transaction item or the transaction item to whatever the transaction item you want, then complete ReFramework will throw exceptions. So when you change the transaction item to data row, then you will have issue with the get transaction data. You need to convert or change that. Then you need to change the errors in process and get set transaction item. So that's how you will be able to correct them. There is also a video of mine of how to convert any project into ReFramework. There you can see, even if you don't use orchestrator queues, how you can convert that. I recommend you to check that in my YouTube channel. In config, if we keep retry more than 1 or 3 times, how system exception handle? How could you please explain? Okay. So here, if we are using orchestrator queues, then whatever the number that you mention in config, it will not be considered. Only if you are using orchestrator queues, only if you are not using orchestrator queues, there is a code logic that will check what exactly the item type is. If the item type is not orchestrator queue item, then it will try to retry. But again, for that, you need to write separate code for that on how to increment the item or how to check with the item. But for now, there is no need. If you are using orchestrator, you can still rely on orchestrator queue items retry mechanism. How can we send mail once the process completed in ReFramework? Okay, do we have add in the sheet? So you need to write a code in the process block after all the items before calling in successful set transaction status. If you can do that, then you can add email after that. But there is no other way, as far I know, to add code on sending emails. One more thing that I would like to add is if there are system exceptions, then in try and catch blocks, you have options and you can add there your emails that you need to send. Okay. What is the difference between jobs and queues? Excellent question. So a job is process under execution. So if it is in queue is just a repository of the data. It's not a process. Okay. So job is a process which is currently being executed. That's the reason there is a there is a separate slot for process and queues or jobs. Okay. Thank you. Return mechanism I have explained. Okay. So here I'm a fresher. If organization asks you to reframe a project, then from here we need to start the activity. So even before you start with ReFramework, you just create a simple flowchart. The first day I have shown, right, how to create a flowchart. Maybe you can create a flowchart and try to map yourself which items or which code need to go at what place, where you need to initialize, what code need to go into initialize, first run, get transaction item process. If you are dividing it, then it will be easier for you. That's the easiest way. And you can get the code or the template from UiPath Studio directly. Okay, this is done. How do we know it? Right. So all the enterprise projects will be on ReFramework or advanced ReFramework. So the main reason why we use this is the small amount of code that I need to write, but I have all the requirements, best practices in place. So that is the reason. So better to write all the codes in ReFramework and you can customize it. Okay, can we add dispatcher workflow into first run? Yes, I have said we can add dispatcher workflow into first run, or if you want to create a separate RE framework for dispatcher process, you can even do that. Okay. A queue is not created on retry. A queue item or transaction item will be created by orchestrator directly if it finds that there is an exception and there is also a retry option. Throw is not used only in if condition, but there should be some logic for you to understand where should you throw that exception. Or let's assume that there is a pop-up that came in and you are using on element appear or element exist. And after that checking, if that element exists, then you need to throw business rule exception. So mostly we will use in if else conditions. So if you have any better option or if you can come across any better option, you can definitely do that. You can add throw at any place. As we are throwing system exceptions and business rule exceptions, why the process is taking so much of time to execute? Because directly it can log message by displaying system exception and business exception. Okay, the bot is not taking too much of time, but since we are executing it in debug mode, that's the reason it is taking time. But if we run in the execute mode or run mode, it will be faster. Load balancing of bots is simple concept. So if multiple processes are accessing same orchestrator queue, that's when the data will be segregated. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, only my bot is running. But what if Aditya bot, Patrudu bot, Vamshi bot is also running and accessing the same orchestrator queue? Then items will be split and every item will be taken by one machine. So instead of having 5 minutes, we can complete all the items within 1 minute or 2 minutes. So that's how we are doing load balancing of the bots. And you can decide how many bots to run. And even you can automate or you can add it to orchestrator queue on how many items or how many processes can run simultaneously. I'll continue for 1 more minute or 2 more minutes till 9:10, then we'll close. I hope all the questions are completed. How to manage transactions ran in the progress while using data tables. Okay, so if you are using orchestrator, if you're not using orchestrator and using data rows, then you need to have a separate variable created, or you can use something called in transaction log1 or transaction log2. There are two variables that you can have where you can check or where you can add the item. Those are not assigned for any purpose, just to make sure that you add or custom add your data. So those you can use, or if you want to create any variable called a row status, and if you want to assign status for it, you can do that and maintain. So if you are getting too much of code with respect to or while using sequence as well as flowchart, that's when I recommend you to go with state machine. But you should also have proper justification, like if you need to move from one state to other state and there is separate justification, like only this in this state you can have only this code and the other state you cannot have the same code again, then you can go for state machine. But anyhow, you can use anything you want. So 2 more minutes. How do we process pending transaction item in next run? See, there is no pending transaction item. A job will be pending. Okay. Transaction item will be only in new state. So why a job will be pending is if no machine is available for a particular process to run, that's when a job will be in pending state. If there is an orchestrator queue item, as soon as it's allocated for a machine, then it will pick orchestrator. Again, the process continues. It will go into get transaction data, pick one item and work on it. So a job will have pending items, so a job will be assigned as pending state, not a queue. In ReFramework, all the exceptions are handled by default. You just need to write the code if you want to write any separate customized code, or else you can just continue with whatever you have. important question. What is the difference between sheets and config? Now there are three items: constants, assets, and settings. Settings is the one that we will be using to have any setting data. For example, where the folder is available, where the URLs are available. But constants are the place where that will be static. For example, retry or custom log message or any settings that are static, which will not be changed at any time. That one you can use constants. And assets is the sheet where you are maintaining all the assets in the orchestrator. Tomorrow you will get to know how to use orchestrator. That's where you will see or that's where you will add the assets, and you can call it from the orchestrator. Again, you can use in config of key name to get the values from orchestrator. Okay, last question that I would like to take. Okay, maybe I can stop it from here. So the time is up. Next questions, maybe I will just upload it to my LinkedIn portal and you can take it from there. Go ahead and check it out. I'm stopping the screen share. Guys, give it a thumbs up if you are able to understand. If you are not able to understand, just comment out or give it a thumbs down. I take everything. So Niklesh, you can take a handover from here.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank